Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Asylum. Um, my thighs and hindquarters were getting sore, so I decided to stand for this one. How you guys doing? Iggy's in the bath currently. The turtles are being themselves, as usual. And I mentioned in the last video that if I have enough time, I'm going to try and record some stuff for my Halloween theme stuff. If you have any ideas for uh, anything really Halloween related, whether it be a book, video game, activities, be sure to let me know down in the comments. And we are on chapter 28, page 229. The walk back was silent, and it was with heavy steps that all three re-entered Brookline. The dorm has never looked so ugly before, Dan thought. So hulking and dilapidated. Dilapidated? Never mind. Nah, it was the scene of a murder and a possible attack, to say nothing of the grisly experiments it had once hidden away. Jordan led them down the hall to his room. As he dug for the key in his pocket, Dan wondered what Abby would say when she saw the room papered in Jordan's mathematical scrawl. But when Abby stepped into the room behind Jordan, there was no surprised gasp, no cry of horror. The room was clean. Not one piece of yellow paper was in sight. The desk and bed were bare, and there were even a couple of posters on the wall. There was also no sign of the mutilated photographs. Dan looked at Jordan, but Jordan had slumped on the bed and was staring down at his feet. For a moment, Dan doubted his memory. Could he have just imagined the way the room had been? The photographs? Surely it was strange that he hadn't mentioned anything about the paper explosion to Dan and Abby when he told them how worried he was about Jordan. Or maybe Jordan had cleaned up to freak Dan out deliberately. There were those two photographs he'd defaced after all. Now that Dan thought about it, maybe Jordan was the one hiding the scratched-out picture of the warden. But could Jordan really be behind all the stuff that was happening to him? It was the second time that night Dan found himself asking this question. Abby put a kettle on Jordan's hot plate, then joined Jordan on the bed. Okay, so I know we're all feeling a little freaked out and distraught right now, but there's something I need to tell you guys, she said. She pushed the loose strand of hair behind her ear, easing into her next words with that delicate earnestness that Dan found so endearing. My Aunt Lucy is still alive. A grown-up Lucy? But so she hadn't died after the operation? But how did you, Jordan trailed off, find out? Abby finished. Dan wanted to know too. Abby had clearly been doing her share of snooping, and she'd managed to keep it incredibly well hidden. They had that in common then. You know that tiny little church on the way to Camford? Abby said. Dan and I passed it when we went to dinner that night, and I thought, well, maybe they'd have a record of Lucy. I mean, supposing she had been here as a little girl, I figured she couldn't have gone far when Brookline closed. Okay, Dan said, marveling at her calm rationality. I went yesterday afternoon. The pastor was in his office. He's this nice old man, even shorter than I am, and he was very helpful. I told him I was looking for information on my lost aunt who lived in Camford in the late 60s. He got out the old baptism registry, and we just started going through the names. Sorry. Jordan was aghast. Dan hoped he was hiding it better, but he felt the same way. There she was, 1973, baptized with a whole group of kids from the Camford orphanage when she was 13. The orphanage is long gone, of course, but the important thing is she made it out of here and stayed in Camford. Like I said, I'm not sure what language this is, but voila, I guess. Oh my gosh, you actually found her? Did you talk to her? Jordan blurted out. No, I didn't quite find her. Not yet, anyway. This is a lot to take in, Dan said. I mean, you're sure it's her. You're sure it's your aunt. There's no doubt about it in my mind, Abby replied. The name, the location, the timing. Do you know what Occam's razor means? I do. Do you? It means if there are lots of possible explanations, the simplest one is probably right. Who are you? What have you done with Abby? Jordan said, and Dan laughed before he could help himself. But when Abby just continued to stare at them, Jordan finally threw up his arms in a shrug. Oh, what the heck. After everything that's happened, I'm pretty much willing to believe anything at this point. Dan agreed. They were way beyond coincidences. And maybe now that they were all being so honest, Abby and Jordan could help him puzzle his own pieces into place. Look, guys, there's something I need to tell you two. He faltered. He'd never been as bold or open as Abby. I did some online research on Brookline. He took a deep, centering breath. He told me that when Felix found Joe, he was propped up in a weird position. And then tonight, when I found Guy in the stairwell, he was posed strangely, too. It wouldn't matter, but there's a mention of this guy on the page that I found. He was one of the patients here who was a murderer, a serial killer. What's the difference between a serial killer and a spree killer? Anyway, he would kill people and then set them up in these tableaux, posed like statues. Reportedly, the victims posed looked remarkably convincing. Dan, what are you saying? Abby asked. He was called the Sculptor, and he was here, at Brookline. I also found a card about him in the old wing. That time when Joe caught us, according to the card, he was cured, but according to the website, no one knows what happened to him. What if he's still around? I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it? Just like what you said about Lucy. Why go far when he could just use his old home as a hunting ground? Dan wished he hadn't phrased it that way. The thought of being hunted by that monster. Could the Sculptor be his stalker? What if he's the head of the program? Anyway. Did he somehow find out a kid was coming here who had the same name as the warden, the man who had performed bizarre experiments on him? You have to go to the police with this, Jordan said. And tell them what? That a man who was treated here years ago is back for revenge? It sounded absurd coming out of his mouth. Why would they believe me? I don't care if they believe you, Jordan shouted. He stormed through the door, throwing it open. He was attacked. My roommate was attacked. Joe was killed. Anything you know, anything that might help. We owe it to them to tell the cops. Jordan's right, Abby said. She gave Dan a sympathetic smile. You don't need to mention the old thing at all. It's like she read his mind. He felt a little guilty that she knew the real reason he was apprehensive to approach the cops. Dan finally nodded. You're right. I could just point them to the stuff I found online. Not to me, not to Daniel Crawford. It's something, at least, Abby agreed. Let's find an officer now and get it out of the way. And I think someone's going to be dead. Anyway, in the hall, it didn't take long to track down a roaming police officer. Jordan and Abby flanked Dan as he approached, as if they were worried he might retreat. Excuse me, Dan said, a bit sheepishly. Police always made him nervous, even when he hadn't done anything wrong. The cop turned. The name stitched on his uniform was Teague. He was short, broad through the shoulders, and had a brown mustache that was just beginning to turn gray. Excuse me. Hi. I'm a student at the program here. I just wanted to bring some information to your attention, officer. Oh, and what would that be? The cop said, crossing his arms over his chest. Well, it's just that I was doing some reading about Brookline online. Out of curiosity, to learn more about the school and so on. A serial killer lived at the asylum, Jordan burst out. I'm not turning back now. Go on. Uh-oh. Teague said with a nod. But Dan could already tell this was pointless. The officer had that look on his face. The skeptical one, where a smile wasn't a smile, but a subtle hint that, while he might be listening, he wasn't the least bit interested in taking a bunch of freaked-out kids seriously. Careful to leave out anything he had learned from his trips to the basement, Dan told the cop everything he knew about the sculptor. He mentioned the similarity between the murders back in the 60s and what had happened to Joe and Abby. I'll make a note of it, Teague said when Dan finished. You didn't even write anything down, Jordan pointed out tartly. I'll make a note of it. The cop gave Jordan a long, cold look. Look, I've lived in Kempford all my life. We know about the sculptor, okay? You couldn't grow up here and not hear about all the crazies who were sent here, especially that man. Dennis Heinlein, I don't know. That's a name I won't forget. He tugged down the edge of his uniform and leaned closer to Dan. He died in '72, the same year this place got shut down. Dead? Had Sal Weathers gotten his wires crossed? Dan wasn't sure who he trusted less, a crazy, self-defined historian or a local cop, but it would make sense that the police would have kept tabs on them. It could be a copycat, Dan suggested. It's not hard to find out about the sculptor online. Anyone could look it up and mimic the crimes. The cop sighed, waving him off. Look, kid, we got our man from last night in custody. This thing tonight, it was an accident. Boy slipped, fell, what have you. So this, he gestured at them, what you're doing is scared talk. You should go see one of the counselors and stop chasing ghosts. Why'd you have to say it like that? How many pages are in this chapter? Let's see. 36, 47. How many are this one? Seven. Took about 10 minutes. 20. So it'll be about 30 minutes. Okay, so chapter 29. The next day, classes were canceled, leaving Dan to spend most of the day in the quad watching students who were leaving the program. Abby had several friends who had chosen to go, and she wanted Dan and Jordan there with her for the farewells. He hadn't expected such a simple task to end up exhausting him, but standing there while person after person gave him frightened or pitying looks really ground down his nerves. They wore their thoughts plainly. They thought he was insane to stick with the program. Felix chose to stay. Dan welcomed his companionship. He couldn't fathom sleeping there alone. Drained as he was from the long day, Dan should have fallen right to sleep that night. But even though his body was tired, his mind was restless. He kept going in and out of sleep in half-hour stretches. Sounds about right. Finally, the clock on Dan's nightstand read 2:57. Felix snored in the neighboring bed. The open window let in a chill breeze that blew the curtains around. Realizing he'd never get to sleep at this rate, Dan decided to get a snack from the vending machines. Careful not to make a sound, he slid out of bed, pulled on a flannel shirt, and grabbed his phone and his wallet. He decided not to change his sweatpants, reasoning that if a cop saw him, it would seem less suspicious if he looked fresh out of bed. He could always claim to be a sleepwalker. He shut the door softly and moved down the hall. No cops in sight. On tiptoes, he crept silently down the stairs to the first floor, willing himself not to think about Yee and Joe. He peered down the corridor, but again, no cops. Where were they all? He had just reached the vending machines and reached in his pocket for change when a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. He turned quickly and let a gust of a sigh. It was only Jordan. It scared the heck out of me, Jordan. And that was an understatement. Dan pressed his palm against his chest, feeling the hammer of his pulse. Sorry, man, I didn't mean to. I thought you'd know it was me. Anyway, what do you want to see me for? He whispered. What are you talking about? Dan was confused. You invited me here. Jordan sounded irritated. I thought it was important. No, I definitely didn't. It's 3 in the gosh darn morning. I don't feel like messing around, Jordan muttered. At least come up to my room so the cops don't catch us. When they were safely back upstairs, Jordan took out his phone. He flipped it open and showed Dan the message in his inbox. Sure enough, there was a text sent from Dan's number asking Jordan to meet him at the vending machines at 3 o'clock to discuss something urgent. Satisfied? Jordan asked. What could he say? Dan blinked at the message, his heart sinking. He had absolutely no memory of sending that text. In fact, he hadn't even considered asking Jordan or anyone to meet him. He'd decided to get a snack only a few minutes ago. How could he have possibly planned for this? I swear, Jordan, I didn't send that. He sounded like he was pleading. Check your phone. What? Check it, now. I want to see your sent messages. He held open his hand, waiting for Dan to produce the phone. I don't know what this proves, Dan muttered, but he remembered the strange emails that had shown up on his phone, so he wasn't even surprised when he saw the message in his sent folder. It didn't matter because he hadn't sent it. He was sure, but Jordan wouldn't believe him. This is stupid, Dan, Jordan hissed. He took off his glasses, and I forgot he had glasses, and rubbed his eyes at the heels of his palms. I really can't deal with whatever you're up to right now, whatever game you're playing. He is in the hospital. I'm sleeping all alone in this creepy, freaking dump, and now you're doing whatever this is. Jordan rubbed his head. I think you should leave now. I need some sleep. Suddenly making his friend believe him was more important to Dan than anything. He needed someone to tell him he wasn't losing his mind. Jordan, you have to trust me. I didn't send this. I don't know who did, but... Dan looked again at his phone of Jordan's, which may as well have been surgically grafted to his palm since he was never without it. Could he be behind all the unexplained messages? No, it was a ridiculous idea. Impossible. Dan was just grasping at straws now and looking for anyone to blame. Anyone other than yourself. But it's in your phone, so you're clearly full of it. Why are you even bothering to deny it? Jordan was asking. What's the point? Look, this is stupid. I didn't send you that text. I'm going back to bed. Yeah, run away, Dan. Real mature. Dan left in a frustrated huff. The dorm was empty as he returned to his room. No sign of cops or hall monitors. When he unlocked his door and stepped in, he knew right away that something was wrong. No Felix. Oh no. Before he had time to process this, the phone in his hand left vibrating and lighting up. He nearly chucked it across the room in surprise. He looked at the screen, hoping the message was from Jordan or Abby. Instead, it was from an unknown number. Dan's hand trembled as he opened the message. You could be one of them, too. You could be immortal. Bend you, pose you, with a smirk or a frown. I'm waiting on the 5th floor, Daniel, to sculpt you. No way, Dan whispered. He held the cell phone close to his face, as if reading it from a different angle would change the word somehow. You're not going, of course. You're going to do the smart thing and show this to the cops. Someone is trying to mess with you. His mind jumped back to Felix. Where was he? Dan had a sinking feeling. Felix must have woken up, found him missing, and gone looking for him. But what if he accidentally found the sculptor instead? Could he be on the 5th floor? Dan had to find him before it was too late. His mind was made up, but he wasn't stupid. He'd get a cop to go with him, even when the cops thought the sculptor was dead. He had proof now that the sculptor was alive and out to get him. Anyone could have written that message, a pesky voice reminded him. Even you said there could be a copycat. Either way, Dan thought, this was the person responsible for Joe and E. Real deal or copycat. This is getting intense. What would you do? I've always been a strong, what do you call it? Proponent of jumping out the window. He'd find out who was behind it all. But when Dan left the room for the second time that night, he discovered that there were still no cops. He checked to the 2nd floor and then the 1st, backtracking all the way to the vending machines. There must have been an emergency in town or something. The Camford police police force wasn't exactly huge. Sorry. Dan took one last lap of the 1st floor, but it was silent. There's no more time. Why not just call 911? Ask where everybody is. He would have to go alone, or risk Felix becoming the next victim. Dan raced up the stairs, actually hoping to make enough noise to rouse someone. Maybe the cops were on the 5th floor already, but when he reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner, Dan knew that this was a foolish hope. The floor was silent, and someone had cut the lights. Dan groped along the wall for a panel of switches, but could only find one. Boy. The wind outside howled, and the overhead eaves, old and probably rotting, groaned in answer. Dan passed one door on his right, clenching his fists to fight the nerves tingling at the base of the spine. He had just enough light to see that the room was empty. The next room was empty too, and the next, and the next. But suddenly, Dan heard a voice in the last room, and he moved stealthily toward it. Please don't hurt me. Felix. He quickened his pace. Please. It was Felix again. Dan had never heard anyone whimper like that. Oh, sorry. A young man reduced to a frightened little child. Dan stepped as softly as he could. If anything was going to give him away, it would be his labored breathing. His throat had tightened so much, each suck of air came in with a wheeze. Pressing against the wall, he inched his head around the corner, dreading what he would find. Whatever he expected, it wasn't a man who stood 6'3" and carrying a crowbar. He was standing over the slumped body of Felix. Uh-oh. Dan must have made a sound because the man turned to look at him, passing the crowbar from hand to hand. He was wearing black gloves. Dan couldn't stop looking at them. Murderers wore black gloves. Do something! No, it says that. I'm not looking at it. Dan had never been a hero or an athlete, but an instinct he didn't recognize, one that came from a deep well of anger, drove him into the lounge. What? He charged, shouting, looking Rambo in his head, but probably drunken buffalo in reality. It didn't matter. The man with the crowbar staggered back in surprise, falling to the floor when Dan crashed into him, hard. Dan heard a loud crack, and he hoped he busted one of the guy's ribs. He brought his knee up, aiming to connect the man where he knew it really hurt, but the man parried with Dan's blow with a kick of his own. Hands as tough as steel wrapped around Dan's forearms and pulled them apart. Dan was no longer pinning the man down. The man rolled over and shoved him to the floor. "You little beep," he hissed. "Help!" Sorry, I don't know why I said it like that. I think because I blocked air and headphones. Anyway, Dan screamed as loudly as he could, but the man's hands were pressed so heavily on his chest that it sounded like a whisper. Dan's head smacked against the carpet, paper-thin padding over concrete, judging by how much it hurt. His vision swam, blacks and blues and purples all meshing together inseparably. This was it. He was going to die. Time seemed to slow. Moments stretched apart, like tufts of cotton being pulled farther and farther until he heard the shouts and the sound of feet pounding down the hall. "Dang it!" the man shouted. "What?" said the man. There we go. Jumping up, he ran to an open window. "Aha!" And disappeared through it just moments before two cops barreled into the lounge, guns drawn. Their voices bounced, muted, as if his skull had become an empty echo chamber. Dan tried to sit up, but his head just hurt too much. He fell back to the floor. "Can you hear me? Hey, are you all right? Did you hit your head? Are you kidding?" He stared at the officer. "Teague, are you okay? Can you stand?" That remained to be seen. At least his vision was starting to piece itself back together. He had tried to nod. "Ow. Bad idea. My head hurts." "The window," he slurred, trying to point the cops to where the man had escaped. "Call an ambulance," an officer was saying to his partner. He was kneeling at Felix's side. "This one needs to get to the hospital. He's been hit." A blanket appeared from somewhere, and the cop draped it over Felix. Can't have him going into shock. Another blanket was wrapped around Dan's shoulders. This is getting weird. Anyway. Where was I? "I'm fine," Dan insisted. The man through the window. A moment later, Teague helped him to his feet. The cops let him regain his balance, and the ache in his head gradually subsided as they waited for the paramedics. The ambulance came, and they put Felix on a stretcher. He was stirring as they left the room, and trying to sit up. Soon Dan heard the sound of an ambulance moving away. Uh-oh. Dan stood on wobbly legs while they took his name and room number and contact information for his parents. "The guy is getting away," he said desperately. "You can still catch him if you go now. He's probably still on the roof." One of the cops ran over to the window and checked around outside. Finally, he turned back to them with a shrug. "There's no one out there," he said, "and it's a good 50-foot drop down to the ground." "He's out there!" Dan shouted. Whoa, calm down, buddy," he said. "Start at the beginning. What are you doing up here in the first place?" He took out a notepad and a pencil. Dan wanted to cry. Yeah, almost done. "I got up to go to the bathroom," he said, not wanting to touch the thing with Jordan and the mysterious text message. "When I got back to my room, Felix was gone. He's been frazzled lately. He was the one who found Joe on the stairs. The sculptor sent me this weird poem and told me he would sculpt me if I met him on the 5th floor. I was scared Felix was with him, so I went looking. I didn't want him wandering alone at night. Uh-huh, he said. He motioned for Dan to continue, but then a third cop strode up to them. She handed Teague a phone. Felix's phone. I think you should see this, she said, and you need to confiscate this kid's cell. Dan swallowed around a hot, sick feeling in his gut, enough to make him want to double over and hurl. Both cops stared at him, waiting. What's on Felix's phone? Dan asked, stumbling over the words. When had it gotten so hot in the room? He was sweating bullets. Please, I'm sure I can explain if you just... Yeah, I'm sure you can. Your phone, please. But... Your phone. Teague narrowed his eyes. I'm not going to ask again. There was no use protesting. Maybe this was for the best. His outbox probably had a message like, Hello, Felix. I would very much like to bash your brains in with a crowbar. Somehow it would happen. Then he'd be taken to jail and locked up. At least then he couldn't get into any more trouble. He'd be left alone with his thoughts, and that would finish him off without ever needing a trial. Then Dan remembered he had a message from the sculptor in his inbox. Now the police would have to believe him, and they could trace the number. Dan handed Teague the phone. It would all be over soon. Teague found his sent messages quickly. Bingo, he said triumphantly. 5th floor lounge, 3:30. I've got something cool to show you. He clucked his tongue softly at just what was on Felix's phone. Sounds friendly enough, kid. What went wrong? I didn't send that, snapped Ballistic. I didn't, I swear to you. Do I look like an idiot? Check my inbox, Dan burst out. I told you there's a message there from the sculptor telling me to meet him there. Teague looked at him strangely, but clicked on the inbox. There was a pause. Nothing there, kid. No mysterious message, and like I said before, the sculptor is dead. This was getting worse by the second. The sweat had soaked through the front of Dan's shirt. He wanted to curl up and disappear. Why don't you tell me what really happened? Dan took a deep breath. Honestly, I don't even know anymore, he said. Teague narrowed his eyes. I tried to find a cop before I came up here, but no one was around. Kid, we've got cops on every floor. There wasn't one when I left my room. All I know is I got to the 5th floor and heard Felix crying out for help. So I came in here, and there was a huge guy with a crowbar. I ran at him. There we go. Go on, said Teague. We were fighting, and then he heard you guys coming, and he jumped out that window. And pointed to it again, feeling especially stupid. Teague looked at Dan and slowly shook his head. Okay, kid, let's go along with you for now. Let's say there's this mystery man who climbs up to a window on the 5th floor after attacking your best friend. Have you ever seen this man before? Never, Dan replied, locking eyes firmly with Teague. The cop hesitated, looking Dan over and chewing the inside of his cheek. You know, the weird thing is, I almost believe you. You're either in the middle of one hell of a frame-up job, or you're a darn good liar. Anyway, I suggest you keep your nose clean until we can sit you down and go over this again. I'm not going to take you to the station now, but I will if I have to. Until then, you'll have an officer with you at all times. Wait. At all times. There we go. Teague touched his forefinger to his nose and then pointed at Dan. You understand me? Yes, sir, Dan murmured. Dang it! Adjusting his cap, Teague nodded, satisfied. Dan hardly felt the grip of the officer assigned to him. Felix would spend the night at the hospital with an officer waiting patiently to question him while Dan was manhandled back to his room. A feeling of numb dread settled in his bones. I'll be right outside, said his jailer, so don't try anything funny. The irony of his room being used as a cell did not escape him. The whole night, the whole day, now seemed like a dream. Particulars melted away, details disappeared. What did the man with the crowbar look like? He couldn't really remember now. Would Felix be able to corroborate Dan's story? He didn't know. He'd have to wait and see. He climbed into bed without feeling the mattress or blankets. It was strange to think that he was a suspect, that the police thought he had attacked Felix. Did they think he was responsible for Yee's attack too? And Joe's murder? If they discovered he'd been blacked out in the basement, what would they say? All the evidence was against him. Outside the door, he heard his guard pacing slowly back and forth. I have to fight back, Dan thought, squeezing his eyes shut. His mind churned. Why would the sculptor have a crowbar? That was a blunt weapon. A clumsy one. The sculptor was smarter, cooler than that. It frightened Dan that he could come to that conclusion so easily. He didn't know the man, but he was beginning to understand, or at least recognize, his evil. And what did that say about him? Insanity is relative. It depends on who has who locked in what cage. Dan rolled onto his side, staring at the clock. If this was a fight against madness, he felt like he was losing. Maybe he already had. Okay, another long reading. Okay, I'm going to get Iggy out of the tub real quick. Back in his cage. And I'll probably feed him again. Because he already finished putting in. What was I going to say? No, I already mentioned that. I'm going to look on Steam, see if they have any more Halloween-themed games. And I'll buy a couple. I'm currently in the middle of recording stuff for, what do you call it? Costume Quest, and we'll see how the sequel turns out too. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody. I need to brush my hair.